here we are. It is September, and let me just one sec. I'm just checking the volume and everything on the actual stream. Yeah, so welcome to the arena. Yep, that's pretty good. All right, good. There we go. All right. So, flying solo for a little bit. I have the chat open here. I've got, everything looks to be pretty fine. And today we're going to play some competitive video games. Or rather, we're going to watch some competitive video games. As you can see up here, I've got a YouTube video queued up. We are not in an actual game today. Our goal for today's stream is to watch some Starcraft 2 and kind of talk about it. Because there's a particular event that happened this week that made me kind of interested in it. Let's introduce ourselves before we get into that, though. I'm Eric Kirsting. I am a Plan H PhD student at UW Milwaukee in the English department. And I run the show. It's called The Arena. Each week, we play and watch competitive video games. What the heck? Wait, there's just an ad going? What the heck? There's gonna be a lot of ads on this? I don't see any notifications there's gonna be ads. Well, hopefully there's no more ads. But this is a show where we watch.
This video is broke.
God damn, I'm having a hard time. This is a show where we watch and play competitive video games, trying to understand how they work, how players are interacting with each other, what their social impact is, and stuff along those lines. This music is actually just a little too distracting for me. We're going to put on lo-fi hip-hop beat in the radio. It's good music, though. It's annoying that the ads play. Okay, well, there we go. Hopefully we don't get too many more ads. Yeah, this is a little easier to talk over than our Turkish funk and Anatolian rock. But I do recommend the YouTube channel we were just listening to is called My Analog Journal. Anyways, we're getting pretty off track. So, thank you for joining us today. This is a show where we watch and play competitive video games. This week there was a continuation of the GSL, also known as the Global Starcraft League. The Global Starcraft League, or the GSL, is the probably the biggest Korean Starcraft tournament. And the Koreans are the best at Starcraft of anybody. And so, at least in general, lately there's been an up-and-comer from Europe named Cyril, who's been taking the Starcraft scene by storm, and he's actually been challenging the Koreans, and he won the World Championship last year. This is the first time, I believe, a non-Korean had won that. In the Starcraft scene, Koreans are like, it's kind of either you're Korean or you're a foreigner. It was just funny because the game isn't from Korea. It's an American game from Blizzard. But because of the high level of skill that Korean players show in the game, they are far and away the leaders in the Starcraft scene. So this week there was a group of death. And if you're not familiar with the sports term, a group of death, in many different sports leagues, there might be group stages. For instance, the World Cup has this, right? Where your country has to play a game against each of the other teams in the group. And then there's some sort of scoring system based on winning and losing and how much you win by and how much you lose by. And only like the top teams of the group will advance to the next stage of the tournament. Well, that kind of group thing happens in StarCraft 2 as well, in the GSL. There's actually two stages. There's groups of 4 in the round of 32, and then there's groups of 4 again in the round of 16. It's not until the round of 8, where there's only 8 participants left, that the tournament boils down to what we consider a traditional bracket structure. A bracket structure is where it's like Mario and Solar might play winner takes all, moves on to the tournament, loser, they're out, right? That's a classic way we kind of conceptualize tournaments in narratives and in like in Karate Kid, for instance, like there's a tournament and we watch as Ralph Macchio's character, right? He goes through the tournament winning each fight, but there's always that threat. If he loses, he's out. But groups work slightly differently. If you lose, you're out, generally speaking, but you have to lose twice, and you have to win twice in order to advance. A group of death is a group marked by, because these groups are often chosen, for instance, in the World Cup by a draw, or in the case of the GSL, the groups are kind of picked by whoever the highest seed is. To some degree, there's a lot of nuance to how that works. But a group of death is where all the participants in the group are considered very deadly tournament participants, right? They're like near the top, and so the group outvalues to some degree its placing, right, in the round of six. In this case, in the round of 16, right? These are all players we might expect could win the tournament, right? Like the fact that some of them are going to go home in the round of 16 is like an upset. It's not what we expect to happen. So, looking at this particular group, let's break down who these individuals are just a little bit. So that we have a good idea going forward as to what to expect, as well as who the favorites are, even though this is a group of death with all very, strong players, who are most likely to maybe get out, as well as who and why, like, this is a group of death, right? So looking at this group, we see there's 4 players: Maru, Solar, Stats, and Rogue. These are all very strong players in their own right. Let's break it down a little bit. Maru, definitely in competition for the number 1 player in the world. The reason why is he last year, and there was the GSL, and there's 3 seasons of it. He won all 3, and I think he might have won the first season this year too. And so he's won quite a few GSLs in a row. He was not current world champion because of Cyril, as I mentioned before, but Maru, definitely just one of the top players in the world. So obviously when he's in any group, it's a group of death to the other players, right? Because he's so good. He plays Terran. That's the human race of Starcraft 2. They have mechs, they have marines, kind of just classic stereotypical kind of things that you'd expect from like a human playable race in a video game might look like. The things are very much modeled after our current contemporary times. Solar and Rogue are both playing Zerg, which is the bug race, and it's kind of based off of kind of like ants, and there's like queens, and there's larvae injects, and there's all these kind of like maybe kind of gross kind of bug-like things, and they specialize in definitely proliferating their numbers. But we've got 2 of them here. Rogue is one of the best Zergs in the world. He was a world champion, I think, 2 years ago. I think it was 2018 world champion. And so obviously a player to be reckoned with. He hasn't won a tournament, like a major tournament, in a little while, but I would say that Rogue is still a threat in any tournament he's in to take you out, because he's just that solid of a player. Solar, on the other hand, I don't think he's had as much sustained success, or hasn't had like those significant highs, but he's made it far in quite a few recent tournaments, making it as far as 3rd or 4th. And while being champion is obviously better than being 3rd or 4th, if you're consistently getting to those higher placings in tournaments, you're a force to be reckoned with. And finally, here we got Stats. Stats is probably the best Protoss. Oop, I got a message. I'm just going to double check that I don't have any play. Yeah, you never know when someone's going to message you like, the stream isn't working, so we'll check that. By the way, say hello in chat if you are here. So Stats, on the other hand, is a strong Protoss player, maybe the best in the world, and I think he's won a recent tournament or 2, but I'm struggling right now to remember exactly who's won what in recency. The reason why I bring this up in their kind of histories is because this is why we watch esports, right? We have like narratives that we build up in our heads. We have conversations with other fans, and we discuss who we think is going to win, right? This becomes the industry around the event, right? It's not just the event itself, but it's all the things that are happening at the same time. So today what I want to do is I want to watch a couple games from the round of 16, or like just keep watching for the next about hour and 50 minutes. So I want to get started, but I wanted to go over them as well. I will note that if you're looking for the most entertaining broadcast possible, I recommend watching these guys. This is Artosis and Tasteless. They're amazing commentators. They're very good at bringing life into the game. Our purposes for today are kind of to bring an audience that maybe is not experienced with the GSL into knowing about this really cool league of Starcraft players, as well as kind of offering an educational kind of look at why did these players make the decisions that they're making while they're playing in the GSL. So let's go ahead and let's dive in to our first set of games. And there might be points where we speed up the game or something like that, because I hopefully we want to get to the very end. But it is a 4-hour video, and this is a 2-hour show, though we will be skipping like the ad breaks and stuff like that. So let's go ahead and start. Our first match looks like it's going to be Maru versus, there's Maru. Maru versus Solar. Okay. So I would say that Solar is the underdog here. That doesn't mean he doesn't have any chance, but I would just say that Maru is the more storied player in this instance. So right away we've got kind of a narrative kind of building up, right? The narrative being, you know, like we've got an underdog here and we got Maru. For Maru, it's really important, right, that he does well and that he, you know, he advances through the tournament to maintain his standing as the best or second best player in the world, right? For Solar, as the underdog, he might have to take more risks in order, or might feel the pressure to take more risks in order to beat Maru. On the side, but another way of looking at it is that Maru feels a lot of pressure because if he loses, it really diminishes the way that he appears among the fans, and in the global rankings and stuff. And so Maru is known, and he's not doing this game, of being a pretty aggressive player. During his like reign of terror last year, he would very often proxy his buildings, and what that means is he would build his buildings across the map so that his units could get to the enemy or to the opponent faster, so that he could take them out right away. A lot of really quick games with Maru where he just would really abuse the opponent in a really aggressive manner and end the game early. Sometimes we might describe that as cheese on the latter scenario, because that kind of play is unlikely if you're a poor player to make you better. Yes, you might win games, but you're not really improving at the game. But when you're in the highest level of tournament, anything goes, right? It's just like who can win. So looking at these players and what they're doing, we can see that it's a pretty slow start to the game. The reason why we can tell that is, I'm gonna go ahead and move there I go. Whoop. I'm gonna move over to here, and we'll move this over to here as well, because I want you guys to be able to see the mini-map. Mini-maps are really important in competitive video games. So looking at the mini-map, we can see that Maru has expanded, which means he's taken an additional base so that he can gain more resources in the long term. And we see that Solar has double expanded, right? He's got 3 bases in the bottom corner. And it's important for a Zerg player to always be above, in terms of expansions, both the opponent's opposing races, which are Terran and Protoss. The reason for this is that other races' production facilities double as their other races' production facilities are separate from their economic facilities. So, for instance, right here we can see that the Terran player has a base up in the very top, but then they also have all those other buildings: a factory, a starport, a barracks. Those buildings are creating units. The thing is, for the Zerg, the building that creates units is also the base, is also the building that collects the resources. And so they typically are going to need more bases because they need that extra production space. As well as the Zerg player, their units are typically less efficient. So they're more likely to want to expand more so that they have more money and resources. They have typically an easier time defending more expansions than other races because their units, while inefficient, are relatively quick, and they have decent defensive capabilities as a result. It's harder for them to overextend. Here we see, on the right side of your screen, you can see this creep. What creep is it allows Zerg units to move even faster when they're on it, but they have to spread it really slowly across the map. Kind of fulfilling this kind of fantasy of being like this bug slowly taking over and rooting your hive in this like place, right? So here, right now, this has been a relatively stable game. An important thing to note is that you can look at the supply at the bottom of our screen. I can't really move my mouse to show you because then the YouTube thing comes up and blocks it. But we can see that Maru has 62 out of 62 supply. That means, he's got 62 supply of units, and Solar has 76, 77 supply of units. Looking at the worker count a little bit over, we can see that Solar's a little ahead in workers. He's got about 10 workers ahead. That's a sizable gap in terms of Maru's ability to catch up. Because if we're just looking at it in pure numbers, because Terran can only make one worker at a time, while Zerg, because of the function of their larva, they can make many workers at a time out of each base. So, all right, here we see Solar is sending in these overlords, which they help manage the supply, but they can also be used here to scout. So he really wants to know what is Maru up to. Because we have omniscience in this situation, we can see that actually Maru is not up to too much. I don't see any sneaky strategy. Oh, well, there's that. That's a battle cruiser. This has become a pretty common strategy as of late, which is this is typically a late game unit. But because it has so much armor, and oftentimes the early game anti-air capabilities of each race, especially Zerg, is relatively muted. We see that players have been starting to rush battlecruisers, and what that means is that they get battlecruisers earlier in the game than you really ought to, or than what is necessarily the safest form, because their aggressive opportunities are so high. Here we see that Maru is also up to 3 bases, and with that, and he's taking a lead in supply. This is, there we go. We see Solar taking a 4th base. Solar wants to stay ahead by 1 base. Solar is also getting into his tech tree, as we noted that the battle cruisers are being made on Maru's side. Solar has built a Spire, which allows him to build air units as well. An important thing to note here, I think, that's interesting is we haven't seen the armies directly up close, but much of Maru's army is made of Hellions and then battle cruisers. And part of the reason for this is that there are 2 resources in the game, which you can see down in the bottom of the screen. There's minerals and gas. Minerals are far more plentiful than gas in Starcraft, but battle cruisers are a very gas intensive unit. Meanwhile, Hellions, those little hot wheels that you see rolling around the screen, those are not very gas intensive. So you typically want to make your composition not just in terms of lines of what is the most effective composition, but what also effectively manages my resources. If you were to try to build, for instance, a bunch of battle cruisers and siege tanks, another gas intensive unit as for Terran that they can build, you might find yourself capped on your gas, right? And your minerals will keep going up, and you're not spending them because you're waiting for the gas that you need to buy those other things. Meanwhile, a good player will typically try to keep all their resources low all the time, right? They want to have a balance of their army in terms of economy and how they're spending their money, but also in terms of how it can deal with the various threats that their opponent may provide. Here the battlecruisers are coming in. They've killed one of the anti-air units. But now the corruptors are here. So the thing about the battlecruisers is they have this ability to just jump away. And we'll see it right here. Yep. Boop. They can only do that once in a long while. But, so you can't, for instance, zoop in and then easily just zoop out. Yeah, and that's the technical term. It's not called like hyperdrive jump or anything. That would be ridiculous. It's just zooping. But so that creates a strategical thing where the battlecruisers are really high value units that you don't want to lose. But if they're just sitting in your base, they're not doing anything. So typically, as we saw there, Maru flew it over to the other side of the map. That way, he could zoop at the first sign of possible death and danger. There is not much in the way of crowd control in StarCraft. Like things that might stop the thing from zooping away. And so that's why it's relatively safe to use your battlecruisers in such a way, as long as you keep them alive. If you start losing them, they're very expensive, and you're really handicapping your army. Here we see Solar's trying to like put a little bit of pressure on, but this is not his full army. I think his goal here is to make it so that Maru is unable to harass as much. Here I would say Solar is actually, even though like not much fighting has happened this game, Solar is behind, and there's a couple reasons for this. One, Maru is further up the tech tree. What that means is he has more options in terms of what he can build. Two, I would say that Maru's army is more complicated and just generally stronger and more more resource heavy than. Oh, see, okay, here, that was like a unique strategy. So let's back up for just a sec. So right here, you've got these mineral patches, which are blocking entrance into the base. The only way these can be removed, they can't be removed by attacking them, is by having your workers come and mine them. And so Solar was hoping that by having some workers mine this, he could later on in the game send some units in and sneak into the opponent's base, but it didn't work out. So because Maru's behind, he's looking for ways to get back in. Or not Maru, Solar's behind, so he's looking for ways to get back in. Meanwhile, Maru, I think he's sensing a little bit of blood in the water, and he's starting to move forward. Because these units here, these like roaches, and okay, here we go. The Broodlords are really strong against the ground army. And maybe Maru saw that, because he started backing off right about when they got popped. Here we see these Hellions trying to harass some worker lines, just trying to get a little bit of economic damage. But as we note at the bottom of our screen, the maximum supply you can have is 200. So your army kind of becomes capped and funneled into that 200 supply. In this instance, both players have near 200 supply. And presumably, when those Hellions were driving across the map and just harassing those worker lines, Maru didn't try to run them away when they got spotted or when the opposing army came. And the reason why is he was sacrificing those units from a supply standpoint in order to open up supply for other units they might want to build, like those Thors, which are really good anti-air. Hellions, meanwhile, those fire-shooting Hot Wheels, they can't shoot up, as we see them here. As we'll see, even when they change forms, they can't shoot at air units. And this is quickly becoming a game about air supremacy. But with air supremacy, there's an obvious counterplay to air supremacy, which is building anti-air units. So there's always going to be a balance between how many air units you build, and how many. That was pretty funny. That queen going down. But there's always going to be a battle between, if you build too many air units, your opponent can just hard counter it. Okay, that's pretty good. Let's see. Yep. Okay. So when they're fungled like that, let's see. Okay, there we go. They both jumped away. All right. Just got a text from my wife. I'm just gonna look at it quick. All right. So, continuing on. So if we look at this map, you can see that purple stuff. That's the creep we were talking about earlier. So Solar has definitely got a big creep advantage. I will give him that. And he's got a big bank saved up in terms of minerals, but he doesn't have much in terms of gas. Typically what we might see from a Zerg player in the late game, and we're definitely approaching the late game, no player went for like a timing attack. What a timing attack would be like trying to knock your opponent out of the game at a particular moment in the game before some sort of tech option is available or some sort of major army strength. Here we see, alright, so there Solar just got a big win because he managed to kill one of those battle cruisers. And there's only a couple of them on the side of, so as we were seeing from the observer, Solar is having lots of different small threats around the map, trying to force Maru's attention into many different places. In this case, those two Zerglings, that's 50 minerals worth of units, managed to pull a large part of Maru's army out of position in order to take care of that. Thing to note though is Maru's army is getting bigger. Here we see, so Solar is trying to plant up a base in the center of the map. A very dangerous place, right? Very close to the enemy's base, easy for reinforcements to come and stuff like that. But Solar wants to take a bigger economic advantage while pushing his opponent into the corner of the map so that they can't push their they can't gain any more bases, because oftentimes in longer drawn out games, some of your early bases will become mined out, meaning that they no longer have resources to mine or to obtain. So you have to continue expanding throughout the game. And so if you can take more of the expansions on the map than your opponent, or block them out from taking expansions, that can be really strong, because then if we're constantly trading our armies back and forth and losing resources in the process, the player that is so that's again just a little harassed, and in this case the economic damage is relatively unimportant. But what is important is that
Solar is focused on taking care of that single unit, and now again this single unit, rather than being focused on the huge armies that are going on in the middle of the map. You're trying to just split your opponent's attention, because we're not, right, as humans, we're not machines, right? We have a limited attention space to deal with various threats and things, and so a very typical StarCraft 2 strategy will be to try to overwhelm your opponent with decisions that they have to make and actions that they must take in order to then take advantage of them being overwhelmed. Here we see Solar's army is completely wrapped up in those Broodlords, which are very strong air-to-ground attackers, kind of like a bomber, so to speak. But instead of bombing like bombs or some sort of explosive, the Broodlord like shoots out little guys that attack on the ground, and those guys cost you no minerals. So in theory, the Broodlord can gain a lot of efficiency as opposed to most Zerg units because of their ability to sacrifice free units to do damage and to possibly take units that actually do cost minerals and resources. If anyone has any questions, let me know in the chat. I'm just gonna double check the stream here quick. Okay, cool. We're doing good, and we're live. All right, cool. So we got battle cruisers up there. Oh, here we see one of the corruptors. The corruptors are air-to-air fighters, but they do have one air-to-ground move, which can only attack buildings actually. And so there we saw him deny a Maru base in the bottom left corner. I would say that base was very unlikely to succeed, but Maru still attempts to take it because obviously the opportunity cost is relatively low. He's got lots of resources to set up bases, and so it's not as much of a cost to start up a base as it was in the very beginning of the game, where your resources are really limited. All right, here we see, so we see with these expendable units that the Broodlords have, they just shoot out, try to take out a couple of the units of Maru, and we see Maru instantly remakes them. But the thing is enough of those encounters happen where you just keep losing Thors, you're eventually not going to be able to replace those units, and that's what that's what Solar is banking on here. So here we see an important update to the game, which is that Maru has got the Ghost Academy, and see that little group of purple bars at the top of the screen. All right, a tactical nuke detected, and the tactical nuke is going to land here. The nuke in this case can destroy like almost all of Solar's army if the nuke lands on top of it, or if it lands on top of even those little buildings there, it will destroy them. That obviously, as we know from the Cold War, nukes are really powerful, right? And here we're going to see one land. And you see how it just destroyed a bunch of stuff there. But the thing to note about nukes is it can destroy your own units, so you don't see what happens here. So he's trying to kill those ghosts before the nukes come down, and he did. But and two, the ghost has to sit there and keep the nuke aimed the whole time that it's there. Otherwise, the nuke won't go off. So there's some downsides to using nukes. Typically, you'll see them more for space control, as we saw there, where Maru used them as an opportunity to have his nukes and try to force the opponent's army to move back. Here we see, again, he's forcing him to move back. This means it's going to be more difficult for Solar to mine from that base, and it's going to move back that creep so that Solar isn't getting a movement advantage, and it forces all of these static defenses. Fortunately for Solar, he can move his static defenses, so they're not really static defenses, but fortunately he can move his static defenses so that they don't get hit by the nuke. Blah, blah, blah. I feel like I just said the same thing 3 times fast. If you see these big blue circles that are kind of being formed on the map, and then you see these white circles, those are called liberation zones. So there's some units called liberators, which are they're like siege units. They have to stay still, but they can pick a zone, and then in that zone they're very powerful. So here, Maru has finally been able to take out this base. In the meantime, Solar has actually expanded to the very top 1 o'clock position.
on the map. And so that's not going to be so bad. Here we see Mara's got a couple units that he's kind of bringing around. The side, he's probably going to harass with those. Again, the nukes are being used to just slowly push Mara's army back. Similar to how we talk, I mean, technically each nuke does cost resources. But they're not very expensive relative to how much money Mara currently has. So it's okay to just keep kind of throwing these out like this. Again, just constantly pushing back. Now note where we started. We started with Solar's army where these Thors are, and now they're like a whole screen away. That's pretty big. That's and so this has become a really intense positional battle over the course of this initial game. It's a pretty exciting game one. At least it's a pretty tense game one, right? Maybe not exciting is the wrong word, because there hasn't been too much direct army to army fighting, but what there has been is there been a lot of just tense, like Cold War-esque kind of like pushing each other back and forth. The use of nukes is obviously kind of apt in that regard. Here we see Mara has once again taken that base in the 7 o'clock position on the minimap, and so that's going to obviously give him resources, but it also puts a little bit of pressure on Solar. How much of his army does he want to send down to possibly deal with that? Does he know that it's there? Here we see that these Thors, it's called a Thor drop, where you got just one Thor in each medevac, and you keep dropping them around to try to deal with it. Here, ooh, pretty good play by Solar. He mind controlled basically those two Thors, and he's having them kill each other, and then he killed them with his little Zergling pack too. So that's a good way to deal with that drop, because when they're mind controlled, he can't just pick Mara can't just pick them back up and run them away. Zergling's harassing the base in the bottom left corner, but the thing about that is that base is a planetary fortress, and it's also surrounded by some static defenses, some missile turrets, which will protect against air. And so both of those things make it so it's a hard base to harass easily with just a couple units. An easy base to take maybe by itself with alright, they took out, that was almost dangerous. They almost took out that nuke almost landed, which would have been really bad. Here we see Solar's just sending out a bunch of Broodlords trying to take out these Thors slowly but surely. Ooh, we actually alright, so now he's moved the Corruptors in. That's like a signal that that shit's going down. And so here what's difficult is you can't move, a lot of units can't move and attack at the same time. Ooh, mind control on some of the Thors. He's moving it down. If we're looking at just the banks, Maru is starting to lose a lot of his resources. He's rebuilding this army. He's building 6 Thors and 4 Liberators right now, but he's losing his army really fast. He's going to run out of resources way before Solar, who's at 10,000 plus in both of the resource categories. Now that's to say, just because you have those resources, if you can't spend them and make an army quick enough, even if you have those resources, it doesn't matter, right? In this case, the Broodlords, which are the real meat and potatoes of this army. Oop, he lost one just there by that nuke. The Broodlords, which are the meat and potatoes of this army, they take a long time to make. You have to make a Corruptor, which takes a while, and then you have to turn the Corruptor into a Broodlord. So that means that if, for instance, Solar was to lose his whole army without Maru taking very much, for instance, let's say he lost it all to one single nuke, that would make it so that Solar would be way behind and probably just lose the game outright, because then you would take your army and plant it upon the production of your opponent in order to deny their ability to create units, and then they would probably just GG out of that game. Here we see Mars once again placing up a zone of you can't come here, like with that, but he took out with the nukes. The nukes are not as effective as they typically are here. We saw they were very effective in that initial engagement, and here we see that yeah, this time the nuke is going to land. But we saw there that Maru was really trying to protect that one single ghost that had to stay still and aim the nuke. By like putting his whole army around it. And so again, we see that happening here and just slowly inching back Solar's army. Alright. And we see that it's kind of funny, but the moment that the nuke goes down, what is Solar do but move his static defenses right back in. An important thing to note is that the ghosts are invisible, and that those little static defenses, those little spores, spore crawlers, spores? We call them just spores, yeah. But those little spores can see invisible units. And so it becomes important to try to keep them around because they'll be able to see the ghosts that are about to destroy them. But the thing is, if you don't move them out of the way, then they'll get destroyed. It creates a kind of complex interaction of risk and reward as to how much are you willing to risk your things. That base, almost dead. And so, yeah, slowly inching up, Mara's trying to take this base away from Solar. Meanwhile, Solar's bank just continues to grow. Mara's bank isn't in a terrible place, but for instance, I think his army is worth more than his current bank is. So if he were to lose this army, he might just lose the game still. But it's pretty close. We see that Mara's making 3 nukes at a time. The production tab in the top left corner can be an important resource to monitor when you're watching StarCraft 2 because it can show you what the players are doing, what they're building, what they're planning for in the future. This has been a really long game. A typical game of StarCraft 2 is not 25 minutes long. A typical game is probably, I don't know, 15 minutes long, 10 minutes long sometimes. And so here we see we're going back to the base we had our initial nuke encounter on, and we see that Solar's got to retreat. He knows that he won't be able to take this in the way that he wants. He's seeding it a little easily. I'm not saying that he's necessarily making a mistake, but I do think he might be able to do something more with this. Let's see. Okay. So, let's see. Here we see now that that's a really aggressive nuke. But it doesn't look like it's going to accomplish its goal. Yep, that ghost isn't going to die because he's invisible. You can't see, those little broodlings can't even see him. But, man, this is a real game of just, wow. Do we want to skip ahead a little bit? Let's see. Here we got another engagement at a base, trying to create a zone of, like, you can't come here, and then trying to move that zone slowly up in order to take out a base of Solar. The thing is, Solar's bank is so big, Solar might want to be a little more aggressive. Let's zoom ahead a little bit. Still no major engagements, 27 minutes in. Wow, it's going to be a 30-minute game. All right, here we go. Another major engagement. When is one of the players going to pull a trigger and just say, nah, my army can kill your army? But that's the thing that's really difficult about these kind of siege-like units that we have here, is that siege units are good when the enemy comes to them, right? And that's why this game has been going on for so long. Neither player feels like they're at an advantage when they're moving towards the opponent. So it's kind of a feeling of like, who blinks first, aka who moves in first, who becomes aggressive first, is more likely to lose. And so that creates a lot of pressure on both players and creates these tense games where nobody does anything for a long period of time. To a veteran viewer of StarCraft, these games can be really exciting because they're relatively rare. But if this is like your first foray, you might think this is kind of a boring game where not much happens the whole time. One thing to note about supply, because we talked a little bit about how supply works and how you get capped at a certain amount of supply and stuff like that. Those static defenses that you see cost no supply. Buildings in general don't. All right, here, there we go. So what Solar just did there was force a lift, and what that means is that he wasn't able to destroy the base, but he was able to force it to go up so it can't be mining, because Terran buildings can fly through the air. They're double as spaceships, which is kind of cool. Looking at workers, Solar is down to 22. That's not very many, but his bank is so huge, he might feel like he doesn't need very many workers. But the thing is like, I think 16, the amount that he has, is maybe just too low, but he's replacing it with army. So if he was worried, he'd be replacing it with more units. So this is important because now his supply is more army. Like, right, we see in the little army supply there is like, now he has actually bigger army than Maru, because your workers count against your supply cap, even though they aren't part of your army, right? And that's what we typically think of as supply. Let's see. All right, again, the broodlings are coming in. Those are expendable units though, right? All of those freaky little ant things that you're seeing in the pink guys flying on your screen, they're expendable. When they die, it costs no resources, it costs no supply. And so running them in, any damage that they do is free, essentially, right? And so in these long attrition-based games, that kind of unit becomes invaluable, right? Because it can accomplish something that no other unit can typically in the game, which is get something for nothing. Typically in Starcraft, you trade resources for resources, and the best players, they're just the best at trading those resources for resources. But when you can have a unit that takes, that doesn't need anything to trade, then you're in a really good place. Holy guacamole. The thing is I don't want to skip too far ahead because I don't want to miss the cool big fight where they all fight each other. But, man, a 31-minute game to start. I was like, yeah, let's get through this whole 4-hour video. And by the way, we're going to start with 30 minutes of gameplay. Here, we'll just speed it up a little. We'll speed it up to 1.75 times speed. And I'll sit here and I'll have it here until we see something happen. Again, we just see zoning with this. This kind of area in the middle of the map is kind of becoming no man's land. Neither player has the ability to really challenge the other player in that zone. All right, we're keeping going. All right, again, denying a zone. Here we saw that Solar was trying to move up a little bit. The stream quality is kind of going down a little bit because we're speeding through all this. Again, I think he lost one Thor there, but the thing is those Thors add up. Look at Mara's gas, it's down to below 2,000. Same thing though, Solar's gas is below 10,000, is below 7. So both players are starting to lose resources, but this is becoming a game where the map had a certain amount of resources and they're just very slowly consuming all of them and using them for this war effort. Kind of a message on what war does, right? All right. So, here, let's see. All right. This is a big fight. Let's back it up just a little. Back it up just a little. So here we see that again. The real hallmark that a battle's about to happen is when anything besides the Broodlords move up. Here, all the infestors move up. They lay out their infested terrain, which is a different unit. And now, look, he's won the encounter. The Thors are retreating back, and the Broodlings are just going to keep going by. They're munching on the butts of those Thors, taking them out. The air units are coming in, taking care of this. So now this base, which has been mined by both players, is kind of, again, not going to work. These Broodlings are starting to deal lots of damage to these Thors. The thing is, the Thors can't take out the Broodlords, which are controlling the Broodlings and shooting them out, if they have to deal with the Broodlings themselves, right? That becomes like a catch-22. You're damned if you do, damned if you don't, right? And so, here the Broodlings continuing to move forward, continuing to just munch on those Thors. Now he's pushing up into like the center. Like this is a really strong position. As we noted, it's bad to move into your opponent. So if you can take a strong position in their territory, you're in a really good place. So again, these Thors are just dying. Mars down to 100 supply out of 200. That means he's got his army is just significantly smaller. This game is going to Solar, and I expect to see GG any moment now. The reason why, yep, there we go. Just a really good engage by Solar. Now let's skip on over to the next game. All right. So, wait. Why is it 1-1? Wait a minute. What? Oh, oops. I don't understand. One sec. Oh, here we go. Okay. Sorry, we skipped that. Now we know Maru's going to win this game. But let's see. Maru's going to win it really fast. And we know, based on just looking at that mini-map, what do we see? We see a blue rectangle. What does that mean? Maru's doing what I told you he'd do at the beginning of the stream. He's going to proxy. So, eventually, our observer will show us that proxy. But this Overlord, this is the question. Will Solar see the proxy before it's too late? And this is what makes proxy so dangerous, is that if you don't know it's coming, it can wreck you in those early minutes of the game. And so Solar's pushing up this Overlord, hoping to see it, but it doesn't look like he will. They're right outside of that vision. There it is. He just saw it. Okay. And so now he knows what's coming. But it isn't just a question of knowledge, even though, as G.I. Joe tells us, knowledge is half the battle. You have to also be able to defend it. So we see immediately these workers come on out to defend. But that one Marine, he's got a gun. They're just the little guys. So the reason why he focused so hard on that one particular worker is those workers can make these bunkers. And the bunker is a powerful tool because it allows your units to shoot out from them. And so now he's trying to use his workers to just deny these Marines here from being able to enter that bunker. Because the moment that Maru has a full bunker, it's not necessarily game over, but it's pretty damn close. So now Solar's like, I think he's thinking, might return to mining. Oh, now the Zerglings are out. The Zerglings are another army unit, right? Actually good at fighting, unlike the workers. The workers do have an attack, but it's just not a very useful thing. So he wants to use these Zerglings to camp on those production facilities, but he's unable to because these two Reapers are out. And Reapers are faster than Zerglings are, at least right now. And that means that they can kite the Zerglings. What kiting is in a game is when you attack, then move, attack, then move. And if you're significantly faster than your opponent, you can just keep attacking and moving, and your opponent will never be able to hit you if they're like a melee, right, in a non-ranged unit. And so here, that bunker is just peppering that expansion base. And here's the thing. A lot of Solar's early game resources have gone into this base. If he loses it, he's gonna be so behind. I wouldn't be surprised to see a GG the moment he uses it. He's gonna wait until the last possible moment, then move the queens forward, try to take this out with all these Zerglings and with all this stuff. But the little bombs coming from the things, it's just not gonna be enough. And this game is over before it began. Maru has just been able to just out-aggressive his opponent. He's still trying to take out this bunker, and he finally gets it, but it's just too late. And now we go on to game 3. Solar got cheesed out of, not really cheesed, but he got out aggressive on that one. Maru took an early game risky play and it paid off. Let's see what happens from here. So now we've got kind of the narrative forming, right? Solar managed to beat Maru in game 1, putting him on the ropes. Is he going to go down into the losers part of the group right away? The best, maybe the second best player in the world? No, he managed to come back in the second game, out-aggress his opponent. Now let's see what'll happen here in game 3. This is for all the marbles, because this is just a best of 3, right? The player who wins game 3, it's not like tennis or something where you have to win 2 in a row in order to win. Just best of 3. So whoever wins this, they get to move on to the top side of the group, and because they'll have already won one, right? And if you win 2, you go on to the next part of the tournament. So here we got the early game again. And we got some fans in the crowd, a sign saying stuff like space justice and whatnot. So let's see what happens here. No proxy this game by Maru. But here's the thing: you proxy in game 2, in game 3. What do you think Solar's going through? What do you think's going through Solar's mind? He's thinking he might proxy me again. He might be playing overly safe, right? Not taking economic risks, so that way he doesn't lose to an early game strategies and early game aggression. But the thing is if you overly prepare for that early game aggression, then you're liable to lose if your opponent takes an economic build, which we can see that's what Maru is doing. Now, Solar hasn't really changed his build that much, but that's something that's always got to be in the back of your mind. There's like a very healthy and interesting metagame between the players, right? Of thinking about what do you think they're going to do, and how can you counteract that, right? And that's why if there was just one universal best strategy that you could do, then it would be a really boring game. It'd be like tic-tac-toe, right? In tic-tac-toe, you always take the center right away, right? And if
you go first and you take the center and you know what you're doing, you can't lose the game, right? That would be a really boring game. That's not why we watch competitive games or esports. You know, we're always interested in the new strategies, and not just the new strategies, but what new strategies are going to come up to defeat the new strategy as well, right? Because like this strategy looks unbeatable. So how will players adapt to defeat it, right? And seeing players adapt to defeat new strategies is just as exciting, to me at least, as seeing new strategies themselves. Yeah. If you guys have any questions, let me know in the chat. And so here we see, again, more similar to game 1. We've got Solar with the double expand and Maru with the early expand. Both players are just gearing up their economies. Solar's spreading out that creep, trying to keep his map control kind of on the way. An important thing for Zerg is to connect all of their bases with that creep, right? So that way they get the speed advantage throughout their entire base of operations, right? It's also important to note they could see through this, and then they can see between the nooks and crannies, and the further you get it out, the more details you have on your opponent's movement, and that can be really important, because obviously StarCraft is a closed information game. You have, in fact, at the majority of the time, you can't even see a quarter of the map, especially in the early game. You see like a tenth of the map, and so gaining information on the opponent and knowing what they're doing is a really key part of the game. So here we see Solar was trying to do some scouting there, but that scouting came at a cost. Solar is supply blocked currently. What that means is he can't spend his resources because he's got, he doesn't have the supply to take care of it, but he's on supply block now. Good players are rarely supply blocked. One thing to note is, like, a lot of times when you're watching people explain StarCraft a little bit, they might say something like, look at du supply. And what that's supposed to mean is that the player is ahead in supply is ahead in the game, right? But typically the Zerg, because of their reliance on units, because they're like bugs, for auxiliary concerns, like for instance, queens serve a production role as well as a defensive army role. Meanwhile, on the Terran side, most units are either just a strict army unit or a strict worker unit. And so we can see in the army, Maru's army supply is actually bigger than Solar's, despite the fact that Solar has a slight edge in the actual supply. And that's because Solar has to build a lot more workers to keep up with Maru, because Maru has things that can work for him from a production standpoint that don't cost supply. And so understanding those differences can help you understand the nuances of who's ahead and behind. So in this case, I would say them being even in supply doesn't necessarily denote who's ahead or behind. But we can see that Solar has a really healthy worker count of 61. That's a lot of workers. That's going to allow you to build a big army. But he's kind of neglected tech to get here. So now he's teching into different things. He's building up that layer, which will allow him options further along in the game. Maru, for his part, I don't think he's going for a timing attack. It looks like he's willing to patiently play out another long game. Or I'm completely wrong. That's a big cabal of Marines and siege tanks. And we see that here, Solar's preparing for it. He's building these Banelings, these explosive units. They're very good at taking out Marines, because explosive units, they can hit a bunch of stuff at once. And Marines are these small units, so they tend to clump up in areas. And they have very little armor. So one Baneling, pop. There goes a bunch of your Marines. So we're going to see a dance happen here where, Solar's rushing in with those Zerglings. Ooh, but he has to explode a lot of... The Banelings did not connect with the Marines. Yes, he took out the siege tanks, which were the most lethal part of this push, but it's worth remembering that those Marines are still dangerous. Oh, another siege tank gets caught out. This has not been a good engagement for Maru. I wouldn't be surprised if he might lose this game, actually. The siege tanks are the units that are most expensive and take the longest to build. They're going to be the hardest part of this army to recuperate and re-get. So now Solar's taking a pretty big supply advantage of almost 20 supply. He's got an equal army and a worker advantage. So that's a pretty good spot for Solar to be in, as well as, and this is probably the most important thing, he's reduced the siege tank count of Maru. because those siege tanks can only come out one at a time. They take a long time to build, like I previously have stated. And so losing 3 of them in that engagement, that really seriously weakens Maru's ability to have positional play in the later game. And here we see it again. All the Zerglings are going to get on top of that siege tank, and they're going to kill it. And so Solar's playing a game of, you know what, if I can just keep your siege tank count low, I'm going to win this game, or at least win this early game and push. Solar's still playing a more economic strategy. He's not playing an aggressive one. There's another siege tank. That one's going to live for now, but the siege tank count of Maru has been just decimated. Maru is now got a thickly marine-based army. And the thing to note about having a marine-based army, as we noted, those banelings, those explosive units, are very good at taking out Marines. So then what happens is if your army's too one-dimensional, it becomes really easy to counteract it, right? And so Maru is slowly being pushed into a one-dimensional strategy, and we'll see how he breaks out of this thing, because we lost another siege tank there. I think it's 5 siege tanks so far this game. That's a huge blow to his army. Yes, Maru is relatively even in supply, and the game's not over, but a lot of banelings very few banelings can take out a lot of Marines. And so we'll see what happens here. Again, Maru is really trying to win or do some damage right now. He understands that he's a little behind economically and a little behind technologically as well. Here we see those Liberators are a really good mix in here. Liberators are aired. Oh, but look at all these Zerglings taking out the third base of Maru. That's a really threatening force, and it's still moving around. The thing is now Solar's got a more than one base advantage, and again, another siege tank is going to go down. So that's the thing I really want you guys to get right here, is that it's not always about supply or about what you take, but it's also about what you lose. And in this case, losing those siege tanks is creating a really putting Maru in a really difficult situation where he doesn't have the technical nuance to his army that allows him to take efficient encounters. And that's the thing about Terran. They have really good units, but they need to take efficient encounters with the enemy player, otherwise they're going to fall further and further behind, as we're kind of seeing here. Another thing to note about how we can see Maru's behind is in the upgrades column. We see those kind of hard to see, but basically what that's saying is Solar has 2/2 upgrades, which means his base attack and base armor for all of his units has been upgraded twice. Meanwhile, Maru's has only been upgraded once. So again, he's falling behind there. It looks like we're going to see another siege tank. Oh, no, he's going to go for the workers instead. That's really good. Again, 17 workers. Now the economy of Maru is dwindling. He's got 90 supply to the 153 of Solar. That's a huge thing. That's a huge gap. And so it looks like Solar might be able to pull off the upset and take out Maru in this game 3 and move on to the winner side of the group. That's really exciting for him as a player. That'd be a big career achievement. And now, and as you can tell, slowly as you're playing, GG, Solar wins. And that's the case at Starcraft 2. You're almost always gonna, when you feel like there's no chance of you winning, you tend to just tap out. So let's move on to Stats versus Rogue. Here we see Stats is playing Protoss. I'm gonna take a break. I'm just gonna let them say the names and stuff. And I'm gonna drink some Coke. Then I'm gonna drink some water. I'm gonna breathe for a moment. But I'm right here. All right, listen to some chill hop. And the early game is relatively simple. There's not much going on. Both players are trying to build an economy.
But the sad part isn't that he was good. It's that he couldn't run in the sports festival. Actually, he wasn't a very good runner, kind of like you. But he gave it everything he had.
My nose is kind of clogged up. It's getting kind of annoying. I should have brought some tissues, but I don't think I have any on me. I'm gonna check quick. I kind of am getting over a cold this week. Nah, I don't have any tissues. That's too bad. Okay, so back to the game at hand. Nothing too strange has happened so far. Stats is known as a pretty, I don't want to say passive, because passive, it kind of has negative connotations to some degree in competitive games. Stats is known as an economic player. He tends to
he tends to take the sure road of trying to. He's confident he can beat his opponent in a long game. Because the thing is like if you feel like you can beat your opponent in a game that goes long, you're typically going to want the game to go long because that narrows the potential ways that you could lose a game due to a strategy that you didn't see coming. Typically, the aggressive player is the one who feels like they are not as good in the long game. It doesn't mean you're a worse player. It just means that you're just not good at that particular skill. And acknowledging and being a great player is partially acknowledging your opponent's strengths and playing around them. And sometimes that means not allowing the game to go long. Obviously, if you're playing though in the GSL, you probably have a really good long game. It's just that when you get to that very tippy top, those differences can become really pronounced. Here we see that this one single adept, it's got this little shade ability. It can like send its ghost into places, and then it will swap places with the ghost. Our jump to where the ghost location is, I think it's shade is the technical term. And so there we saw he's shading in, just trying to get some information, and then he's canceling the shade because he doesn't want to lose the adept. In terms of information, both players have done a pretty good job scouting. Stats have been doing it with those shades, but Rogue sent in an Overlord scout, right? That big floating bubbly balloon kind of guy. Excuse me. And the Overlord is really good at scouting because it's a flying unit. And in the early game, as we've noted, there's not a lot to counter flying units, but even though he didn't see the starport, he saw the Phoenix come out, and the Phoenix went and shot down right there. You see the Phoenix is that flying, kind of like airplane-looking thing, and the Phoenix, the Phoenix's just mere presence at this 4-minute mark in the game tells Rogue a lot about what stats is going for. He knows that he's going Stargate. He knows what types of units are available to stats to make, and then he plays around those kinds of units. Because you can't just build all of the technological buildings at once right away in the early game, because otherwise then you're sacrificing a lot of economy and army in order to get there. And if you sacrifice both of those things, you're going to be in a really bad position, because with no economy, you're not going to be able to use the technology that you've already gotten to build technically advanced units. And with no army, you're not going to be able to defend yourself against early game stuff. So typically, great players will not immediately make their armies. Okay, so here we see, is that going to finish? No. Yeah, so like that shade. Oh, wow. I think that, oh wait, that's not a full wall off. Never mind. I thought first, is that a full wall? No, it isn't. A full wall off is where your opponent can't get in at all, or like no ground unit can move through that without destroying those buildings. It's rare to see Zerg wall off like that, because Zerg is a ground race. Oh, he spotted the Nidus Worm. So Nidus Worm allows the Zerg player to teleport their army from one side of the map to another. But the thing is that if your opponent catches it, they can just destroy the worm right when it gets finished building. So here we see he builds the Nidus Worm in another place. Nidus Worms used to be really expensive, but they're relatively cheap now. Here the army's coming up. Is it gonna find the next Nidus Worm? It looks like they are. Oh, and right when it... That's really bad. We'll see what happens. Oh no, the army is gonna get out. He was unable to take it out in time. So this allows these otherwise slow and lumbering units to get across the map and start doing their damage. See what happens here. So now those are another expendable unit that don't cost any minerals or resources to make. Just the units that make them cost you minerals and resources. And obviously you can tell just based on these couple games we've seen that that's one of the big themes of Zerg, is these kind of expendable units. Some of them that sometimes don't cost anything to make. Here we see now that there's a unit there that can threaten it. The Zerg player is having to he's dancing around the map trying to attack at the weak spots. There's a lot of Nidus Worms out. He's trying to abuse the mobility of the Nidus Worm in order to take out his opponent. But what's tricky about that is that each time he does that, that's costing him money. So he has to be able to be getting damage with this. Fortunately, like as we see here, he is getting damage. He just wrecked Stats' ability to make units. And he built a Nidus Worm. Ooh, that's a bold Nidus Worm just right in the middle of the base. It's like, come kill it. That's like a force your opponent back. And as you can tell, Stats is moving his whole army across the map. He's saying, all right. You can, and now we see why he did the full wall off here. Rogue, that is because he was like, I'm just going to Nidus out anyways with my tube worms. Oh, but this is bad. So here's what happened here. Yes, he got a lot of damage out of that, but the Nidus Worm was destroyed. And what that means is that those units have no way to get out. And that can be one of the problems with the Nidus Worm strategy. Here we see Stats is trying to push up and do damage there. Luckily for him, he was able to save some of those. Man, but Stats is taking quite a beating here. But Stats is ahead in workers, but they're both on 2 bases. So it's kind of tricky. It's not black and white, like easy to determine who's ahead right now. Rogue is ahead in supply and in a big lead in army, but his army is mostly these units that can only summon minions to fight like once or twice a minute, right? And so that creates this kind of awkward game where Rogue is trying to take fights like at these particular moments in time. Meanwhile, Stats can take a fight whenever. And so it's a real balancing act. And here we see the wall off is done. All these units are running in. They're going to dive right on top of this army. And we're going to see what happens. Will Rogue's army be able to survive this direct onslaught by Stats' army? It's looking like maybe it's kind of close. I mean, on one hand, he did lose all of his roaches, but on the other hand, those swarm hosts did survive up at the high ground. And so the thing is that you can't send all your swarm hosts at once, or all your little locusts at once, because yeah, that's GG. Rogue was just able to take it there. All right, continuing on to the next game. So what we saw there is that Rogue was really abusing the mobility of the Nidus Swarm in conjunction with these units that are very strong in limited bursts, the Swarm hosts, in order to put a lot of pressure on Stats from an economic standpoint and from a production standpoint, right? He was destroying a lot of production and buildings and stuff like that. And eventually he just took too much of a lead, and that just ended up taking Stats out of the game, because Stats wasn't able with his big final push, even when he got into the base, to take care of it's the 9th anniversary of the GSL. Take care of Rogue. Let's skip ahead. And we'll skip even a little bit of the early game. We'll see what happens here. Okay. So here we got So our Zerg players are really... This is a really aggressive strategy. You don't build buildings in your opponent's base if you're playing an economic game. So here we see this is called a cannon rush. Cannons are typically a static unit, right? But here we see that Stats is building cannon... Oh yeah, well... 3 pylons to try to block that off, and then he's gonna have a single cannon here. I don't know if this is gonna work. This cannon in the middle of the bases is gonna be really useful, but at this point I am unsure how. Whoa, that probe, everything rests on that probe. Oh, and it got in. Oh, that's gonna make this so difficult. So now that cannon in the back is gonna protect the cannons in the front, and slowly we're just gonna see Stats trying to push up cannons, right, and leapfrog each other, kind of like we saw with the nukes, but in a kind of a different way. And so the thing is it becomes really difficult for Solar to deal with this, because whenever he tries to attack these buildings that are building, that cannon's just gonna mercilessly shoot at all of his stuff. So he's taking damage while doing this. And the thing is what Stats can do is he can cancel the building of the cannons in order to oh, this is such an ugly fight for Solar. He can just cancel those buildings, and he gets most of the money back in a refund. It's kind of like, if you bring something back to the store after, after only having it for like a day or two, right? The warranty's still good. Here we see just sending tons of workers in. Rogue is behind in workers. He's a little ahead in army. And, oh, yeah, look at that. He just can't do it. So now he's focusing on those shields, at this point, even if he does manage to survive this, it's probably not going to be enough. Well, maybe this could turn into a regular game, but look at how many workers he's behind. You don't want to be the Zerg player at 3 minutes and 30 seconds in and be down 15 to 21 workers from your opponent. The good thing for Rogue is that he does have 2 bases, but those cannons are still posing a pretty big threat in the middle of the base. There's only one pylon left that's powering all those cannons, so maybe if he can take care of that one pylon, it'll be okay. But Stats looks like he's content to just turn this into a typical game, and we see phase 2 of the strategies coming out now. In order to deal with all these early game defense structures actually in his base, Stats has had to Rogue, I've called Rogue Solar a couple times. Rogue has had to build quite a lot, spend a lot of his resources on ground-to-ground attacking units. So now, Stats has a really good idea, which is he's going to build some air units that can lift up his ground units. And what this is going to do, it's going to put a lot of stress on the army of Rogue, because this immortal that's going to be coming out soon is just going to he's just going to keep lifting it up and dropping it down on the ground, and he's never going to get it. It's never going to die, and it's going to slowly be doing lots of damage. It's kind of like a cannon that he can move and just warp out of time and space at any time he wants. Let's see. So we'll see what happens here. Yep, he's waiting. Oh yeah, this is pretty good. He's waiting to have 2 immortals so he can juggle the immortals into the warp prisms. That way neither of them are taking damage while they're both firing pot shots at the opposing player. And still his cannons remain, just creating this really bad wedge between the 2 bases, making it difficult for him to transfer workers, making it difficult for him to rally his army together. Finally, it looks like it might be taken care of, but where's that other warp prism? It's got to be coming in soon. And when that thing comes with its immortals, I am unsure if there's going to be enough army here from Rogue to deal with it. It's coming. It's coming from the other side of the map, but that's a flying unit. It can fly pretty fast. Yeah, I'm pretty stuffed right now. Oh, yep, see, just like that, what you just saw, that's going to happen at infinitum now, where Rogue is just going to, there they are, those units punch real hard, but they only fire once in a while, so you can just keep firing them, picking them up, and firing them again. This is going to be pretty difficult for Rogue to hold. So, while those things are, okay, so here we go, they're trying to surround the army, and so he wants to wait until the last possible moment and then pick up those units. Yeah, pick it up, ferry it back. The shields on the protest units can recharge, so as long as you don't lose that base health, that green bar that you're seeing, as long as you're only losing that blue bar, you're fine, you don't mind. Here we see Stats is very low on resources, very low on stuff, but he's high in tech. Ooh, he lost the Warp Prism. He only's got 1 now. Oh, the queens are focusing it down. There's a lot of queens there. That's 5 queens. So it becomes really crucial here that these immortals start taking out these queens, because otherwise it kind of creates this, it's an interesting game where as long as the Warp Prism's alive, those immortals are invincible. They live up to their name. They are immortal. But they're weak to those queens. So the immortals have to take out the queen to support that Warp Prism. And so slowly he's losing more and more health on those. He's trying to juggle them back and trying to do more damage. But this is not going very well. Sats is still on 1 base. His economy is passable at best, but terrible at worst. He's finally blowing up that building to try to get in. This is the moment where Rogue turned the game around. Here we go. So now, instead of trying to end the game, which is what he was trying to do with those immortals, now he's trying to back up with the immortals. He was trying to do some economic harassment. Oh, the War Prism got ganked out, but he was able to use a different protest ability called Total Recall, or
Total Recall. I think that's the name of an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. And Rogue wins. That sends Rogue and Solar into the winner's bracket, and Stats and Maru, who I think are the two favorites of this group, into the loser. That's pretty tense. So now we'll jump forward to the next game. Is that between Solar and Rogue? All right. So this is ZVZ. ZVZ tends to be fast-paced and exciting games because a lot of the Zerg units, specifically the Baneling, can just decide fights like that. Like, we don't have long, protracted fights. It's like if a Baneling connects with a bunch of Zerglings, all the Zerglings die. And so that creates really hectic and fast fights where both players are trying to use their Zerglings to avoid the enemy player's Banelings. But we see right away here that Solar's trying to take a third base. It looks like so is Rogue. So we're in for a more economic game. Typically, these can be pretty aggressive, but both players seem to be playing kind of on the defensive side. And when that happens, we're going to have typically a longer and more drawn-out game. There comes the Baneling Nest for Solar. Let's see if a Baneling Nest comes down for Rogue soon. The counter to Banelings would be Roaches, because Roaches, kind of like Roaches on planet Earth, are up, and no, there goes the Baneling Nest. Roaches are really heavily armored units, so they don't take as much damage from the Baneling's explosion. And that makes it, and when the Baneling explodes, it's kaput. It's dead, right? It ain't coming back. And so that creates this interesting dynamic where you need your Banelings to do damage, because if they don't, then you just literally sacrifice your army to do nothing, right? Just do a little dance, stretching out on this nice Thursday afternoon. Take that as a cue to drink a little bit more water. Zerglings surround that Zergling. So here we've got the kind of Zergling wars going on here. Both players are in a relatively similar position in terms of workers and army. Rogue is a little ahead in army, but it's not such a significant amount that that's like impassable. Neither player wants the other player to see how big their army is, because here we see, Rogue is stockpiling Zerglings. What that means is that he's hoping to surprise Solar with a big amount of army that Solar's not expecting. Yep, there they come. Those are the stockpiled Zerglings. And so, but that was a big Baneling hit. It hit like 4 or 5 of those. That's going to turn the tide of this potential fight. Here the Zerglings are just like little ants running around your screen. They're running around fighting each other. This is a really volatile matchup. Taking out that queen, though, is really important. As we know, the queen has a production function in StarCraft 2. This is a pretty close fight, but it looks like Rogue Zerglings are going to lose out there. Solar's still ahead in supply, though. But a lot of this is about positioning. Like I said, one Baneling hit, suddenly the flip scripts, and you're way ahead. So, both players are trying to work really carefully. Rogue is going for armor first. Meanwhile, Solar is going for attack first. I'm unsure at this moment of attack plus 1 Banelings. Ooh, that was a mistake. Oh! Ooh. Another thing to note is because Banelings are so volatile, an important thing to do is you can get more ahead by taking even trades, right? And so there we saw Solar take a pretty even trade, and that allowed him to pull up further ahead. Man, armies are just stockpiled around the map. They're moving around really fast. And here we see, that's a lot of Zerglings. It's going to take out a queen as well, and might even take out this base. There's not much there. Those Banelings, they got really good connections. Oh, that base is good as dead. So, okay, but it does look like, Rogue had a counterattack at the same time. Attention economy is really important in StarCraft 2. The thing to note, though, is that it looks like, Rogue has fallen behind here. Rogue's army was not able to do the damage that Solar's army was in that engagement, and that means all the difference. So Rogue is now down a base, he's down in supply, he's down in workers, and he's down in army. If you're not ahead in any category in StarCraft 2, you're in a bad position.
because it's hard to catch up to an opponent who's ahead of you in every way. If you're ahead in army, you can leverage that advantage to try to win the economy game. If you're ahead in economy, you can leverage that to try to pull ahead. If you're ahead in technology, you can leverage that. If you're ahead in upgrades, so you need to have something that you can leverage over your opponent. But right now, Rogue is just behind. He's behind in economy, and he's behind in every facet. It becomes very difficult to come back from that position. So I'm very much expecting Solar to take this game. It does look like I would say maybe Rogue is slightly ahead in tech, but not by very much. Not by an amount that is really gonna make a difference in any of these fights, and that is the scary thing. Both players are going for +1 range. Actually, okay. I can see one scenario where Rogue is ahead. In terms of upgrades, because Solar went for the melee attacks upgrade right away. Meanwhile, Rogue went for the Carapace upgrade. And the Carapace upgrade upgrades your unit's armor, right? And so the thing is that transcends to all Zerg ground units. And so what that means is that when we're starting to switch gears, where it's going to be ranged unit versus ranged unit fighting. And the thing is that melee upgrade is not going to be useful for Solar in ranged unit versus ranged unit fighting. But the Carapace will be useful for Rogue. So there's a chance that his army, because of the upgrades, will perhaps be able to dish out, or take more damage rather, than Solar's, and that could mean a difference even if he's just a little behind. These two Banelings are going to come in and try to kill some workers. They get 2, not a very good trade. Ooh, that Zergling gets in to see some stuff. So I would say, yeah, once Rogue's ranged upgrade is complete, he's going to take an advantage. But we see the second phase of Solar strategy. He's building a Spire. As we previously noted, Spire allows him to build ground units. Air units, right? It's like a little airport. And so air units can be devastating in ZVZ, because like we've noted, Zerg doesn't have a lot of stuff that can shoot up. So suddenly, though, something could really impact that. And we see Rogue is fully buying into the I'm gonna win this game in Roach v Roach combat. He's getting melee attacks #2. So his units are going to have a significant upgrade advantage over Solar's. But the thing is, if your unit can't shoot air units, it just dies for free, right? And we've talked a lot today about how if your unit is doing something without taking any losses, as is the case here with 9 Mutalisks on the way. Whoa, that tech switch could be totally brutal, and Rogue doesn't see it coming whatsoever. Rogue doesn't have any static air defenses at his bases. These Mutalisks might just end the game. Oof. But one thing to note is against Mutalisk versus Roach, I will just note, Mutalisks are not good against armored units, and Roaches are an armored unit. So it takes them a long time to kill the Roaches. So in a straight up army fight, Rogue might be able to do a lot of damage, but look at the supply. Rogue is at 154, Solar's at 198. Sure, Rogue has a upgrade if this was a straight up fight between Roaches and stuff, but that's not the case. It's Queens versus Mutalisks, and those upgrades are not doing much at all. We got a fight here in the middle of the map, and honestly, Rogue's army, even though it's got the upgraded advantage right now, it's just too small. It doesn't matter if your units are stronger than your opponents if you've got way less of them, as Solar takes the game. And that was really built off the back of just having an early economic edge, parlaying that into winning the initial skirmishes in the game, and then using that to create a technological and economic advantage to push the game in the late game and into his victory. All right, next game. I'm gonna take a little bit of a break, drink some stuff. Put that behind there.
Oh, Rogue is going for an early game aggressive strategy. He's got a bunch of Zerglings that he ran across the map, but Solar has spotted it. I think Rogue knows Solar spotted it, so he also threw down an expansion. So this is kind of like faux aggression a little bit. Rogue is technically behind in terms of economy, but he's building up his economy behind this. So that Rogue is not necessarily expecting to win with his attack. He's hoping to just do some damage, spook. Oh wow, he's even got Banelings behind this. Wow, this could be really dangerous. If he can take out these other Zerglings. Yeah, Solar correctly sees those Banelings popping, and he's like, oh no, this is not good for me. Alright, so some good Baneling explosions are really crucial here. Oh, he's got the Queen surrounded, and he's got speed up. Speedlings, this is going really well for, I think this is going really well for Rogue. Like we noted, Rogue does not need to win with this. He just needs to deal damage, and I would say he's doing a good job doing that damage. The Spine Crawler comes down. The Baneling does do bonus damage to Baneling, but the thing is, that's a static defense. It's down at the bottom of the ramp, and if that Baneling lives, okay. He wants that Baneling as protection against other Zerglings, right? The longer that Baneling is alive, it creates this really awful problem for Solar, because okay, so all right, there come the Lings. Just like, look at all this whole time, all those drones, which should be mining minerals, right, and getting creating economy for Solar, they all had to be running around scared of those Zerglings, and it's still happening here, right? He's not able to mine efficiently, and that's going to allow Rogue to take more and more of a mineral advantage in this early game. His second base is already up. He's ahead in technology. This is like a flip of the script of last game. So you can see how being aggressive, which is what Solar was last game, can be really powerful in these games. Right now, only one of these players has a Baneling nest, and that's super important. Are there any Banelings here at home? There's one morphing. Even one Baneling creates a really makes it difficult to turn in. It's kind of like those siege tanks a little bit, right? Here we see one Ling gets in to scout, and he's sending 4 Lings to deal with it. But those 4 Lings that aren't at the front to deal with the potential army of Solar, that he's retreating with. Alright, so it looks like this game is going to turn into a macro game. It's actually relatively close. Even after all that aggression, I would say that Rogue is a little ahead. And the reason why is Rogue has a Baneling nest, but Rogue is behind in workers, so if he doesn't do anything with that Baneling nest soon, he might fall further behind in terms of economy, and then that would be bad. And he'd probably lose. Oh, the Banelings get caught out by 2 of these Lings. And so what happens is like, the Baneling has no regular attack, right? It can only explode. And you don't want to explode it on just like one other Ling or 2 Lings. You want to get that big damage with it. So there, the 2 Lings that caught out those Banelings. Yep, Rogue is like, I want to win right here, right now. You see how quickly the numbers advantage of those Zerglings transform into that. So there's 4 Banelings there. What they want to do is they want to move in. Oh yeah, that's a lot of Banelings. He has to do something. He has to do a lot of damage with this though. All right. There are Banelings on the way though for Solar. Okay, it takes out I think 2 or 3 Queens there. That's a lot of production damage. That means that even though Solar has more workers, he's going to be possibly unable to spend that money. There's these 2 Banelings here though, so he wants to destroy those Banelings with a small number of Zerglings and then send his larger number of Zerglings in to take care of this army. But Solar might have the bigger Zergling count, and he does. That means that those his Zerglings are going to take out the thing. They're going to take out these 2 Banelings that are working, but now a couple more Zergling reinforcements come in, and this is pretty tight fights here. The supplies remain really even, and these are just balancing on a knife's edge. And this is partially what makes Starcraft such an entertaining game for me, is that like things can really switch very quickly, and each decision feels like it really matters. Look at all the Zerglings coming across the map from Rogue though. That's a lot more Zerglings than I think Solar might be able to deal with. But the thing is, if these Banelings can land on them, poof, that army is gone. And that volatility, I think, is what makes ZVZ one of the more exciting matches to watch as a viewer, but it makes it one of the worst matches to play as a player. As someone who plays a lot of Zerg, I really hate it, because like I feel like if I make one mistake with my Zerglings and run them into a Baneling, boof, that's the game. And that volatility, that can be really stressful as a player. Ooh, Solar's taking 2 gases. That really surprises me. That kind of indicates to me that he thinks the aggression is over, but as we can tell, that Rogue has a lot of army that he's still building up. I think Rogue, yeah, Rogue is going to take all those Zerglings. He's going to try to, he might be able to run by this army potentially. Yeah, that one Ling is getting a lot of scouting in. It can be hard to hide things from your opponent sometimes in ZVZ because the Zerglings are so fast and you don't have the ability to purely wall them off from the opponent. If anyone has any questions, you can let me know. I got chat up right here. I'm losing my voice a little bit. Been talking too much. Alright, let's go back to the game at hand. Okay. Why Solar building an Overseer? That seems like a waste of gas to me. They're both still on 2 bases. It looks like Rogue is ready to back off. Rogue does have an economic advantage now. He has 43 workers to 37 of Solar, but Solar just took a 3rd base. That means he's going to be able to power boost his economy a little bit more. Here we see the Overseer coming in. The Overseer can lay out a little Changeling. But the Changeling didn't work out this time. He's just using this Overseer to scout out his opponent. Try to catch what he's making. He sees the Roach Warren go down. And now, Rogue is tech switching into Roaches. Roaches can really be the coup de grace, so to speak, of this game. Really dish out that killing blow. Ooh, and a Nidus Network. The Nidus Network allow him to just get those Roaches right on top. The problem with the Roaches compared to the Zerglings and Banelings is that the Zerglings are really fast and the Roaches aren't. So you can kind of dance around your opponent with the Zerglings and try to take fights like, oh, your Roaches are here? Well, I'll attack there then, right? And so now we see with the Nidus Network, he's going to try to flip that on its head a little bit and use the Roaches to teleport them across the map, and then bam, the Worm's head comes out right in the middle of your base. You got nothing to defend this, and your Zerglings in a straight up fight, even though they can dance around pretty good, they're not going to be able to take out all of these Roaches. And so here we see it, and it looks like, yep, Solar is ready. But the thing is, just because Solar is ready, that doesn't mean he can stop it, right? And here we see he's retreating his army up to deal with the Nidus Worm. Oh! And that's a lot of army. And now the Roaches are coming out, and this, 22 workers. Look on the left side of your screen if you're wondering what I'm thinking about. That's too many. And Rogue takes game number 2. And now we go into game number 3. We got 30 minutes left today. We might, the winner of this, by the way, moves on to through the tournament, so that's pretty exciting. All right, game number 3. We had a couple game number 3s today. This is like winner takes all. These are some of the most stressful moments in sports, right? It's the Super Bowl in the 4th quarter on the final drive. If we score, we win. If we can't score, we lose, right? Just to make some NFL references, because today is the start of the NFL season, and that's pretty exciting. I like the NFL. Big Lions fan. I'm hoping that they do really well this year. But just like, there's the stressful moments where it's kind of like when you're a competitor, there to some degree that the moments you dream of, right? Like being able to clutch it out in a game 3 or in that final drive or in the closing minutes of a soccer match. Can you score? Can you save, victory from the jaws of defeat, right? That kind of thing. And both these players are definitely feeling that pressure. But what's interesting is a lot of times in competitive games, it's the player who can maintain composure, right? I think that there's 2 kinds of players to some degree. There's players who have to, there maybe 3. There's like players who are maybe what we would say not clutch, right? So when they get in, so they're really good players, but when they get into a position where it's all riding on these moment-to-moment decisions, they might get decision fatigue or indecisions will set in, and they'll struggle to play the game at the heights that they're capable of because they're starting to overthink things and or just flub things because they're nervous, right? I'm sure we've all felt that way before in a tense situation or in especially a tense competitive situation where a lot rode on our competency in that moment. Another example would be the player who is, I don't know if we might call them clutch, but they're more the player who is able to maintain their composure in the face of that tense and stressful situation. So they're able to just keep playing as they normally would in that situation. But then there's a third kind of player. And these are like kind of special, and I don't know what we'd exactly call it, but maybe these are like the people or the players or the teams we describe as clutch. And what that means is that they're like, when everything is riding on their performance, they don't just play as good as normal. They elevate their performance to some degree, right? A great example of this in the NFL, to return to the tweets I made before I sent out this stream to the Twitterverse. Tom Brady, right? The quarterback for the New England Patriots. He's already a great player, but it just seems that there's been many game-defining moments where he's been needed to, win the game, right? And he needs to, pull off some sort of miracle or play particularly well in the closing minutes of a game, and he's able to do it. He's able to clutch it out in a way that was even better than his performance leading up to that point. Those kind of players are really special. In Starcraft terms, players who elevate their play when everything's on the line. Hard to exactly say who's got like the best in game threes but one player who comes to mind for me is probably Dark. Dark is a Korean Zerg, and I've just seen him. I think he won last season of GSL, and sometimes it just seemed to me like he wins in game 7s, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he loses a lot of game 7s. If you're in chat and you know better than me, let me know. That's just one who came to mind for Starcraft for me. There's some teams in okay. Well, let's talk about the game that's actually on hand, right? Here Solar's trying to like bust through. It looks like he's got the bigger Roach army, but look at all that static defense that Rogue is building, and once that comes up, it's gonna be harder for him to take it. It looks like Rogue might be able to Rogue is definitely gonna be able to defend his base over to the left with all those spine crawlers, but what is he gonna be able to defend the base to the right? I don't think so. Yep. Oh, the moment you see all those workers pulled, you're like, this is bad freaking news. You don't want your workers fighting. They're woefully inefficient fighters. Here we see Zerglings coming in. Rogue's trying to retreat back to those things. It's I don't know. Rogue is slowly just losing workers, and now they're even. So Rogue's one big advantage has been lost, and Solar has a big positional advantage. But look at the army supply. Solar has 9 army and Rogue has 26. Man, if Rogue just sends his army across the map like that, he might just be able to roll over Solar. Ooh. This is a dangerous situation for Solar to be in. He did some really good damage there to equalize the game, but now there's this threat of a counterattack is really profound. And a lot of these units, even though the supply is now starting to even up in terms of the army supply, a lot of these units are not going to be here when this attack would have arrived. But Rogue turns around. He doesn't know all the information that we just knew, that Solar had nothing in his base, right? So Rogue turns back. He's looking for an army, and he's like, okay, there's some roaches, but ooh. So now, that's unfortunate. So Rogue is trying to tech switch into air units, because as we've noted, they can be really powerful in these kinds of situations. But the problem is that Solar's already spotted out that he wants to go for that Spire. He's going for a Spire of his own right after. Oftentimes the second mouse gets the cheese in StarCraft, and in this case, like being slightly behind your opponent, but knowing what they're doing and they don't know what you're doing, can be really useful. I need to drink some water. I'm losing my voice. So the supplies are even, the worker count's even, the army's even, the upgrades are even. This is just an even game. But Solar is taking a fourth, Rogue's taking a fourth too. They're really mirroring each other in terms of what they're doing. I will say that Rogue just took a big risk. He built over 10 workers, a dozen workers at once. He's taking a big worker lead, but it's going to take a while for that worker lead to manifest itself in terms of an army and technological lead. So so now these mutalisks are coming in. Not much can shoot up here, so now these mutalisks are just trying to take the advantages that they can find along the map. Be careful though not to run into these queens too much. The thing is damaging Zerg units isn't too impactful because they heal up not super quick, but they do heal up. So you need to kill some units in order to really take an advantage. And there, while Rogue was running around with this mutalisks and bugging Solar. Oh yeah, Solar's like, yeah, screw your mutalisks. I'll just build corruptors. So corruptors so mutalisks can shoot up and down. So they're like a good utility air unit to some degree. They're really fast too, but they're not great in a straight up fight, especially against those corruptors, because corruptors are air to air units. So they're just much more effective air fighters than the corruptors than the mutalisks are. So you see, the moment Rogue sees those corruptors, he's like, see you later. And luckily the mutalisks are faster, so he can just bolt out of there. But that really puts a damper on his ability to harass with those mutalisks. We see that Rogue is going up into Hive, but I don't think Solar is, or Solar already has this Hive. The problem is that now if that's a lot of corruptors. I wouldn't be surprised if Rogue just decides, you know what? I'm going to switch into a purely ground army, and that's what he's doing. He's going into the Lurkers. Lurkers are one of the better ground-to-ground fighters in the game. But the thing is that Solar's Corruptors are not going to be functionally useless in a big army-to-army fight. So that's a bunch of wasted resources and supply that just isn't being used. But the thing to note is, there are enough Lurkers there right now. Rogue is kind of behind in economy, which doesn't really make sense to me. What is Rogue? Rogue has spent a lot of money on tech units and not a lot of money on his actual army. So he's behind an actual army right now. But those lurkers are, like we've noted throughout today, static defenses can be king, right? And help a lot. And those are siege units. I mean, not static defenses. So the lurker is a siege unit. And so even though Rogue was behind there in terms of army supply, Solar can't really attack in because these siege units are here, like kind of blocking off the Solar's army from pushing in any further. So I would say right now I'd give maybe a slight edge to Rogue, but not a really big one, a really small edge to Rogue, just because he's got a huge technological advantage and the economies are relatively even. And ooh, that was dirty. So what he did is, remember those corruptors we talked about being useless because they're air-to-air fighters and there's no air units on the side of Solar. Well, what Rogue did, of Rogue, and so what Solar did is he brought them over and he attacked a critical building that allows Rogue to build lurkers and hydras. Right? Yeah, no, not hydras, just lurkers. The lurker den. And so, I'm sorry. And so by killing that, he really puts Solar into a bind. And now he's used the Nidus network to get right on top of his opponent's base, and and now he's using it to just do lots of damage here. And it looks like he's gonna take out that main base. That's just a straight up GG by Solar. Solar recognizes, I have nothing that can deal with that army. Rogue is the first player to move on from this group. We still have 20 minutes, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna skip the game between Maru and Stats. Oh my gosh, but Mario and Stats are both so good. Never mind, I can't do it. I just can't do it. I love Mario and Stats a lot. So, this is the surprise, right? These guys are in losers. Loser goes home. If you would have told me at the start of this stream that Mario and Stats would be playing at the bottom of this group, maybe I would have believed you because this happened in the past and this isn't live. But I definitely would have been shocked because these are two players that I expect to exit out of the group. Here we see Rogue, this is why this is a group of death. Maru, if he goes home, that's a huge upset. That's a player who's vying for very likely first or second place in this tournament, out in the round of 16, right? And so here we've got Maru. They're both under a lot of pressure here. Maru's pretty clutch. Maybe he'll pull it out. But Maru has kind of underperformed a little bit this year relative to last year, but it's kind of hard.
like we can kind of sometimes feel like it's kind of like this thing where like describing like a player as overrated, for instance, can be difficult. If someone is the best player in the world, right? If they're number one, how could they possibly be underrated, right? If they are number one, because somebody has to be number one, and if they're number one, they are. So then the better you get at something and the further up you get in people's minds as being a top player, the more likely you are to be called overrated than underrated, right? Because you only call players underrated if they're not getting the accolades and the achievements that they you feel they deserve. And so it can be tricky. I'm not necessarily saying that Mario is overrated or anything, but rather in comparison to last year where he won 3 GSLs, which is like amazing and almost unheard of. Like outside of, like, it's hard to take a year where you win 3 GSLs. There are only 3 GSLs a year, or 3 GSL championships. It's hard to look at that and then say, where can he go from here? He can almost only disappoint, right? He can almost only in 2019 have a worse year, right? Because otherwise the only thing Mario could have done is match his last year. He would never be able to surpass what he did last year in terms of GSL performance. Here we see in this early game, a little bit of harass has come down, but mostly we've had an economic game. The first real dangerous harass appears to be coming from this medevac. I think it's some Widow Mine drop. Widow Mines are another area of effect splash damage, kind of like the Baneling, but instead of blowing up, they shoot out like a little missile that does like a similar Baneling blast in the area. And so I think that Stats is expecting it because he's got, look at how he's stationed all of his army units kind of around his base. They're just trying to catch this medevac before it can come in and drop those Widow Mines in the worker lines. Alright, let's return back. I was just looking online for some stuff quick. And alright, here we see those Widow Mines finally going. And we see the workers really running away. One of the Widow Mines went off. I think it only got one worker. Ooh, this one actually gets off. Oh, but he doesn't quite. Takes a little too much damage. Mario is ahead of Stats, even though that mine drop failed. In terms of Stats is a little ahead on workers, I'd say, but Mario has a much bigger army. So it looks like Mario's going to be going for a timing push with these medevacs. He's looking for, yep, and the thing to note is also that Stats' army is a little split. And so, yes, your army might even be better than an opponent's army, but if they're able to fight your army on their terms, maybe fight half your army at a time, that can be really dangerous. And so we'll see what happens here in terms of this engagement. Yeah, it really looks like Mario wants to pick a fight soon as possible before Stats' army can grow any bigger. Because he's sensing blood in the water, and so but those shields they're making all the difference here. Those force fields that you see at the center of your screen, because they stopped Mario from advancing his army into a really favorable position. So on the right side you can see that there's a counter that shows when upgrades are close, and we see that quite a few upgrades are completing at the same time, especially for Stats. +1/+1, that's gonna make it more difficult. Mario has +1 attack, but now his army is at an upgrade disadvantage, and he does still have the supply advantage though, and his army's more mobile, so he's more likely to be able to take a really good engage. So we'll see what happens here. All right, pushing up again. The force field split the army in half, and that creates that disadvantage that we were just talking about. Where if I can fight only half your army's going to lose, even if your whole army would win the fight, right? And so using your unit's special abilities as well as, and see that observer right there. This right parked over the units. Yep. Okay, he got it though. The observer is an invisible unit which can't attack, but what it can see, and it's relatively cheap. And so oftentimes, they'll be parked at different places on the map. Stats now is the opposite. Stats is smelling a little bit of blood. And when your opponent retreats in Starcraft, you tend to know, or tend to think, maybe something's up. Maybe I can take advantage of this. But Stats, he's no fool. He backs off. He thinks that maybe he's not as ahead as he thinks. Or as he might be led to believe by Maru. Here we see a drop. So now the shoe is on the other foot, so to speak, right? Stats is gonna drop Maru here, and so he's gonna drop these, I think, zealots. Yep. So these zealots are gonna run in and just try to deal damage, but Maru's just eminently prepared with this Viking, this air-to-air fighter. Luckily, fortunately for Stats, that's gonna get out soon, or get out right away. And so he's only going to lose 2 zealots in that, which is pretty decent. It's not a big loss to lose 2 zealots. So, all right, and here another drop. The things burrow, and they're going to get off some shots. That's 5 workers gone. That evens it up. Maru's actually taking a worker lead. Because of the nature of StarCraft 2 and some of the production capabilities that Terrans have, it's actually really bad for Protoss to be behind Terran and workers, because that means that they're just naturally collecting less resources, because Terran have some ways to spend energy from their buildings to collect resources beyond just using their workers. So Stats is quickly remaking workers 3 at a time to get back up to a healthy 73, but they're both relatively even on economy. Both have 4 bases. Both of them have relatively big armies. Both of them are teching up. Ooh, did it take out army? I don't think so. Okay. Here you see Maru's got the positioning there. Alright, this game's kind of winding up to a potential conclusion. Or not. I thought that Maru was moving across the map. Those units you see on the center of your screen, they're really good at, they create these like disruption zones. They're called disruptors, and anything in that zone just dies if it's in it. So you have to be really careful not to have when it pops, the units die. So like it can kind of like chase units around. It kind of reminds me of some of the other units we've talked about today where they shoot out like a disposable unit. In this case, it's like just the disposable zone that you shoot out, and then you have to recharge that ability. But it's really strong. If it can land, for instance, on all those ghosts, that could be the game for Maru. So it becomes really important for Maru and Stats to manage these units. There's one, just the zone, but it didn't hit anything that time. But you saw its zoning capabilities. The second Maru saw that coming at him, he just starts bolting his Marauders back, because those little zones move relatively quickly, almost as fast as a unit. So if you don't start running right away, that might get on top of you, and that could be really bad. You see that he's keeping him in the very back though, because he wants to, oh, he got like all the ghosts. Oh no, that's so bad. Oh, another one, he got like 4 Marauders. Those are really good hits. Oh my goodness. Wow, that was terrible. Oof.
so the thing to note is that there's energy units in the game, like the Ghost or the Infestor or the High Templar. And these units, they require time to to grow energy, to use their abilities. And so losing your Ghosts is not as simple as even just remaking them. It's kind of like the siege tanks we saw in a game earlier today that we were talking about, where the siege tanks are strong units, but they take a long time to build. So it's not just losing them from an economic standpoint that can be bad for the player, but from like the time standpoint as well. Just sending out one of those little zones, it does a little bit of damage but not much. Sending out another one. Okay, so he destroys that little building. Not super important. Now we're playing kind of the zoning game. I think Stats is very understandably wanting to hold back Maru and keep him kind of zoned into his base, because he's teching into these Tempests. And these Tempests are long-range siege units that are high-tech, have a lot of health, but they have like the longest range of like any unit in the game. And so what you want to do is you're going to want to park them real close, but outside of the range of your opponent, and then just pepper them with these big blue orbs. And so by containing Maru right now and making sure that Maru, there they are, those are the Tempests. Not the play by Shakespeare, the Starcraft unit. By containing Maru for all this time, he's allowed to more seamlessly get up this critical mass of Tempests that's necessary for being able to do critical damage to his opponent. And so now he's coming in, bam, look at that. They're just able to take free damage. Free damage is the name of the game today, right? If you can take anything for free, you better take it, right? This flanking force, though, might be able to do a lot. Ooh, and we see that his army is just out of position. Wow, it's really bad for Stats. He was winning that engagement until that flanking force took it out, and one Tempest goes down. The Gloak personal cloaking is almost done. That's going to make it harder for him to land those strikes on those Ghosts. See how much more time is in this game. There is I'm gonna speed it up just a little bit because we don't have a ton of time. So now they're playing kind of cat and mouse here. The EMPs, that's an ability by the Ghost that I haven't mentioned specifically. We've talked about the nukes, we talked about how they're invisible. Then one other thing I have is EMP. What that will do is remove the energy from a unit, or for like the Protoss units, it will also remove their shields, which makes them significantly weaker. It's like cutting their HP in half. Now the shields come back relatively quickly, but if you can do that right before a big fight, right, then you chunked your opponent's HP in half, and that can be really obviously pretty impactful. It can kind of be like in a single player game when like you do some sort of narrative event to weaken a boss before you fight them. Here we saw that it's pretty clear to me that these Ghosts are kind of moving around the map, hoping to get some nukes off onto the bases of Stats, because right now Maru's really contained. But these Ghosts just aren't able to find like the right cracks to slide into, as kind of like spies into Stats' base. Here you see Stats has split up his army. He's attacking multiple locations at once. These Tempests have not been paying for themselves in terms of the damage that they're doing, but they're doing mental damage tomorrow. Yeah, this is D&D now. They're doing something, because like they forced Maru to like make a tech switch into these Vikings, and those Vikings are very good at air-to-air fighters, but they're not good at other things. And so now we've seen that Stats has like stopped building the air units, though he's building air unit production facilities. So it's kind of hard to say exactly what Stats is going to do. It appears that Stats is trying to stay flexible for the time being with this air army of his, You know, he wants to be able to switch into ground units, it looks like, or to be able to stay on the air units if he's able to whittle down this air army of Maru. Here, the air army is really coming in hot. Took out another Tempest. Those Tempests are like the siege tanks, big and expensive. Ooh, then now we've got the nukes acting as a zoning tool, allowing for Maru's army to just slowly move up and take more and more advantage. Look at all those buildings that just got destroyed. Stat says, no way, I'm going to take out your buildings on the other side of the map. Now what? Well, Maru's like, well, if your units are over there, then your army's not together, and I'm just going to push forward. And look at how much, oh, Stat's losing so much. Ooh, let's slow it down a little bit. This is the finale of our show today. Oof. Both players are losing significant parts of their army. This is like kind of like a base trade. What a base trade is when both players' armies are at the other player's base. And there's nothing to defend either player, and it's like kind of another who will blink first. Like if you send your army back, then your army's not doing any damage while it moves back. So but this nuke is gonna land on the army, and it takes out most of this invading force from Stats. And again, it looks like Stats has lost it. He's down to 68 supply. He's got a lot of minerals in the bank, but he's got nothing to deal with this army at his gates. He's not going to be able to handle it, which is interesting. Like this is like if you look just at the economy, we'd say that Stats has the ability to come back. Ooh, but these DTs, that's an interesting choice. They are invisible, and they have blink too. So we'll see what he can do with these. But maybe it's just too little, too late, and it is. And this Maru will win game 1. If you want to see the rest of this, just look up Group C GSL on YouTube, and you can watch the rest. We're at minute marker about 3 hours in, and I recommend you watch it. It's really been exciting. I love watching the GSL. It's really exciting to see Starcraft played at the highest possible level. But as for our show, it's 2 o'clock. We're done for the day. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you have a wonderful day. And join us next week for more exciting competitive gaming action. Bye.